and then you start dating someone else, you're always better off not throwing shade on your former love. Let's NFL translate. Richard Sherman, who was let go by the Seahawks and signed by the 49ers this past week, did not heed that advice. He had a few things to say about his former head coach, Pete Carroll. Take a listen.
It was kind of philosophical on his part. You know, a lot of us have been there for 6, 7, 8 years, and his philosophy is more built for college. You know, just 4 years, guys rotate in, rotate out. And so, you know, we had kind of heard all the stories. We had kind of heard all this, you know, every story, every funny anecdote that he had. And, you know, and honestly, because he just recycles them. And they're cool stories, and they're great for team chemistry and building, et cetera, et cetera. But we had literally heard them all. We could recite them before you even start to say them.
CC, I know how much respect you have for Pete Carroll and what he's done as a coach and what he's put together with this team, but how much stock do you put into Richard Sherman's comments?
Well, Richard, there's some truth there. Pete does have a style, and for a number of different reasons. But first of all, we have to know that Pete Carroll is one of the most successful coaches that we've seen. He's one of the rare coaches that had success at an elite level where he had a dynasty at USC. And then went on to be able to win and play championship football with Seattle. Now, he didn't take over a Seattle team that had a championship pedigree.
Nope.
So you have to give Pete a lot of credit for the things that he has done. We have seen great college coaches, Nick Saban, come to the National Football League and get crushed. And where are they coaching now? Typically back in college. What about the genius we had at Oregon? Didn't he go and take over Philadelphia?
Kelly, yeah.
Now, where's he coaching now? Huh?
Right, exactly. Right now? Where's he coaching?
Yeah, he's not coaching in the pros.
Right.
All right, he had enough of pro football. So those are the examples, too, that came before Pete Carroll. What he established in Seattle, it's a very intense program. It's very competitive. They bring a lot of people in off the streets as far as free agents, guys who might have resumes that you would never look at, former basketball players, guys that have checkered past as far as character. Pete brings those guys in. He likes to cultivate an environment of competition, and typically that's what you get when you get on a college campus. He also runs very, very, very physical practices. You can see by the NFL, they have been fined a number of times by being too physical or doing more practices than what they should.
Lost a draft pick for it.
So that means there have been a couple different occasions that the NFL found them at fault on the collective bargaining agreement and what he requires from his players. He's also state of the art. He's the one tackled the tackling drills that they do in the National Football League. He adopted from Australian rules football to remove the head from tackling. So he's done some cutting edge type things. I give Pete credit for that. Now, what Richard is saying is, as a player, sometimes you get a little bit naive to the story. Not naive to the story.
It gets monotonous. You get numb to the story because you've heard it so many times.
Right. And what Pete has done has been very, very successful. So there's no need for Pete to reinvent the wheel. He's been successful in college at an elite level and in Seattle. Now, when you leave there, of course, Richard Sherman, of course, people, because they're not happy, you know, they will say things. But it's a credit to Pete. I don't look at it as something. Most coaches can't be successful. Right. You have to have some type of who you are, what you are. Pete has those things, but he's done things to change the game.
And let's also remind the audience that when Richard Sherman agreed to terms, right before he agreed terms with San Francisco, what did he do? He walked out of the room, called Seattle, said, here's the deal. Do you guys want to match it? So Richard Sherman wasn't exactly eager to run out of Seattle. Right? But
so he would have went back for another year at the college program.
Exactly right. Exactly right. But I understand what he's saying, which is, and I'm going to bring up a coach you didn't mention, a coach who was successful in the NFL, but it was a fire that burned brightly for a short period of time. Jim Harbaugh. Another guy that's I think he can be cutting edge offensively at times. He hasn't been at Michigan, I know that. But a guy who, his real calling card is the motivation, the rah-rah, those similar types of things that we see from Pete Carroll on the sideline. And guess what? He was very successful in San Francisco, and then all of a sudden, guys are retiring, guys are leaving, the front office is sick of him.
Yes.
So, and we've seen Jim Harbaugh. He's successful everywhere he goes, but it's quick. It's quick at Stanford. It's quick at San Francisco. We'll see what happens at Michigan. I know that lifetime contracts, we'll see how quick it is there. But the benefit you have in college is, like Richard Sherman said, you get every 5 years, it's a total new roster.
Yes.
You have 0 people that have been there from your stories 6 years ago. And so I understand why some guys, that philosophy or that style might work better when you have a new audience each and every few seasons.
You played for how many years under Denny Green?
10 years.
10 years. So I would imagine that as you're sort of further along in the league, considered a veteran, a successful veteran, maybe you don't need the stories as much, the extra motivation, the rah-rah, the pushing that you know the young guys need earlier on in the league. That's why I'm not sure if it's a sort of a legitimate knock on Pete Carroll, that he knows he's got his veterans, and he's been successful the last couple years. Let's get these young guys up and going.
And Denny was a great motivator.
There's no doubt.
Unbelievable. He's the best coach, you always say, the best coach you played for.
Yes.
But you, I'm sure, by year 7 of 10, you had heard some of the things that were new, the stories that made all the rookies laugh. That was the 3rd time you'd heard them.
Right.
So how did you, what was your approach to making sure it still resonated with you?
I made sure that I could still challenge myself, and I made sure before the team, when he said things, that I was fully engaged. When he would say things, I would nod my head. I'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, coach. And what Denny did, too, he included me a lot in the conversation, so I had to stay on my toes.
Right.
Like, he would challenge me. We're playing the Dallas Cowboys. You know, we're going to go over a lot of different schemes, but it boils down to, can you whoop your man? Chris Carter, Deion Sanders is going to be guarding you. The question is, did you defeat him in this game? They go, Wednesday. I'd be like, goodness gracious, okay, coach. Like, so, and then the team could see how he stayed on top of me, that he could utilize that into the others. It's up to the player, too, to try to keep it fresh in your mind. It's very, very difficult. I'm not going to look at Pete Carroll's system because they say it's a college system that's not successful, because if he didn't have the eye for the talent, if he didn't have the specialness on defense, who would Richard Sherman be? So let's not forget those things.
And we have a former head coach who's going to come in and weigh in on this for us a little bit later on. Coming up, though, another law.